Hi everyone. Today I am free range turf courtesy of www.turftribe.uk. I'll link to it directly below. The last time I advertised this site it was immediately targeted and she had to find another t-shirt maker. Trans activists are such bullies. Anyway, a number of interesting issues were raised by a viewer who commented a few times beneath the video I did about detransition and regret, and I was going to respond to them all in one video until I realised that would be a very long video, so I'm going to make maybe 2 or 3 shorter ones instead. What appears to have provoked the comment is that I said something like, it's never been easier to be transgender. Now, obviously I don't mean everywhere in the world, but I would include the United States in that generalization, along with other Western democracies. My commenter, who is from the US, says, "Whatever is happening in the UK, trans people do not have special preferential status in my country and in fact are being marginalized and criminalized." Really? Okay, we'll look at some of the evidence around that claim in this and in future videos. But the first thing they ask me is if I am against medical intervention for adults who wish to transition. Oh, before I answer that, in that video I did on detransition, I cut out a bit that I had originally included about why I was using the word transition. I cut it out only because I felt the video was already a bit long, but I now regret cutting it out because, of course, a couple of people did call me out on my use of the word, which is fair enough. I use the words transition and detransition because it seems the easiest thing to do. Everybody understands them, even if we don't all understand transition to mean the exact same thing in respect of transgenderism. Transition just means a change from one state to another. This baby, for example, transitioned at 3 months from being swaddled to not being swaddled. We transition from one system to another, from war to peace, from one lifestyle to another, from one persona to another. Obviously, I don't think you actually change from woman to man or man to woman, but by changing your appearance so drastically and to a great extent irreversibly, and maybe your name too, you are changing your public image and, I assume, quite a lot about your life. And that's what I mean by transition. It only occurred to me on reading this comment that I may not have ever talked about this in a video before, though I make my position clear on the front page of my website. I also want to make it clear that if I say I am against something, that doesn't mean that I want there to be laws banning whatever it is. By the same token, if I defend something in principle, it doesn't mean I agree with it or think it's a good thing. It's very much about the balance between freedom to do and say what one likes and causing harm to others or just being a burden to them and to society in general. What I wrote on my website about 3 years ago, and it's still there near the bottom of the front page, is: I would like to reiterate that I support the right of adults to ultimately make their own decision on how they present themselves and on whether or not to medically alter their appearance. I also strongly believe that trans-identifying people should have the same human rights as anyone else. To expand on that, by adult, I mean over the age of 25, which I understand is the age of full maturity and when the brain is fully developed. I also think these interventions should be at people's own expense. I do not agree with publicly funded healthcare systems like our National Health Service in the UK using its precious resources to try to cure a psychological problem through physical interventions, in spite of any anecdotal evidence that in many cases it does appear to make some people feel happier. We can listen to people like Buck Angel and Jamie Dodger, both female who've transitioned to appear male, saying that doing so saved their lives, but they can't know for sure whether that is actually true, whether they wouldn't, with or without some other kind of therapeutic care, have come to terms with their female bodies. Further down, the commenter says, focusing exclusively on people detransitioning does tend to discount and dismiss those who apparently are successful and satisfied with their transition. Well, in a video that is about detransition and regret, I'm obviously going to focus on detransitioners and regretters, and the reason for making a video exclusively about them is that they struggle to be heard compared to those who are happy with their transition, compared to those who defend and promote transition and the ideology behind it. In the wider picture, it is the detransitioners who are dismissed and discounted and even mocked and told to shut up by the trans lobby. But this is not just about the healthcare of individuals, it's about power relations in society and members of the dominant sex class colonizing womanhood, accessing our sex-based rights and protections and hurting women in the process. To give a recent example that has made headlines in the US, 16-year-old Abigail Wheeler from Springfield, Illinois, was a member of the YMCA swimming team. One day she turned up to the Y, walked in to the female changing room and saw that there was a grown man in there changing. She said she was scared and upset and left immediately because if she'd stayed, she would have been alone in there with him, and she wasn't comfortable with that idea. I hope I don't need to explain why that is a perfectly reasonable and human reaction. She says that she spoke to the head coach and the CEO of Springfield YMCA several times with the support of her family, and she was repeatedly told that gender identity is protected under Illinois state law. Therefore, grown men are allowed to claim to be women and change in women's locker rooms. According to local media, the Illinois Human Rights Act prohibits the denial or refusal of full and equal enjoyment of facilities, goods and services solely based on someone's gender identity. Or, to put it another way, if men who claim to have a womanly gender identity want to access women's locker rooms and get undressed, they can do so, and other users can just put up with it or F off. Is this really true, or is it how the Y are interpreting the law? It doesn't entirely make sense to me, especially in a country where trans-identifying people supposedly do not have special preferential status and in fact are being marginalized and criminalized. Anyway, the CEO of the Y, a woman called Angie Soul, said, "We've not had a report of misconduct. We've had a report of somebody finding somebody that was different than them in a space that they didn't think they should be in." I can't tell you how angry that framing of the situation makes me. It is so disingenuous, dishonest, deluded, and I can't think of another D word. Damn stupid. Yes, men and women are different. That is why there are separate male and female locker rooms in the first place. If you think people who are different from each other in that way should all be in the same locker room, then why not have all men and women sharing one locker room and see how well that goes down in your Christian organization? What are you seeing as the difference between the man who says he's a trans woman and the man who doesn't? By framing this as Abigail finding somebody that was different from her in a space that Abigail didn't think they should be in, the CEO makes it sound as if Abigail is the unreasonable one, as if she'd seen a black woman or a disabled woman in the locker room and said, "Oh no, she's different from me, I'm not comfortable." It's despicable. Oh, that's another D word. So, after being told that nothing was going to change, Abigail and a teammate made some signs, some notices, and left them in the locker room. This one says men are not welcome here, and others said biological women only, women's rights, and save women's sports or something. Isn't that awesome? A direct, peaceful protest making a point but hurting nobody. According to the CEO, Angie Soul, however, they were vandalism at best. Vandalism? What, did they break something when they left those notices? Discrimination at worst. And let me just issue one of these. It's definitely made to make a certain segment of the population feel very uncomfortable in that space. That's the definition of discrimination. Also, it seems like there's people around who have a very different definition of Christian than the YMCA does, Soul said, but treating one another with respect and dignity, the golden rule, treat others like you would like them to treat you, that is the core, the definition of Christianity. Unless the person feeling uncomfortable happens to be a young woman. Her discomfort, her dignity doesn't matter. Respect for her feelings, don't be so silly. And this is not a one-off case in American sports. Let's have a little reminder. The college swimmer, Lia Thomas, for example, I think it's fair to say he's a big, burly, muscular, ripped dude, and he used the women's locker room completely disregarding the feelings of his female teammates who were told by their coach to put up and shut up.
We did not give our consent. They did not ask for our consent. But in that locker room, we turned around and there's a 6'4" biological man dropping his pants and watching us undress.
The girls are Alana Smith, Selena Sewell and Chelsea Mitchell. The girl in the middle, Selena Sewell, missed out on the opportunity to compete for a scholarship because in a particular race, only the top 6 qualified. She came in 8th. First and second were Terry Miller and Andrea Yearwood, who are boys. They weren't on puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones or anything else. They were simply fit, athletic young men who claimed to be girls.
And once the gun went off, the 2 transgender athletes took off flying and left all of us girls in the dust. I knew right then and there that some girls would be missing out on great opportunities to succeed, and that women could be completely eradicated from their own sports.
In Connecticut, these 2 men hold 15 women's state championship titles.
So even before I get to the track, I already know that I'm not gonna get first place or maybe even second place. And it's really hard knowing that because I know that no matter how hard I work, I won't be able to have the top spot.
And which athlete have they got to front the campaign? This man. C.C. Telfer, who, when he competed in the 400 metres hurdle for his university's men's track and field team in 2017, he was placed 390th. He starts calling himself a woman, and guess what? In 2019, he came first. He wins a title. What a champ. Remind me again who is being marginalised here. Still, it's only sports, right? Not that important in Western culture, right? Especially American culture where you've got sports scholarships and stuff like that. No, gender ideology is about crushing women's rights. It's about reinforcing regressive ideas about how women are supposed to be and about how men are supposed to be and the effect this can have on young gay guys. And it's about harmful falsehoods being taught to children and the tragic results it can have for them. Right, I'm just going to jump to another comment made by the same person in response to someone else. But even this woman presenter, that's me, cannot reconcile the fact that young people who may truly need this treatment, blah, 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 are not helped if they have no access to puberty blockers as they develop secondary sexual features. No, I can't reconcile it because I don't accept that it is a fact that anyone truly needs this treatment. How is it humanly possible to think that a child who, for whatever reason, is distressed about their sex truly needs to have this crucial stage of physical and mental development stopped, with all the risks to their health and well-being that this entails? Puberty blockers are damaging. I've talked about the evidence for this in 2 other videos, but they include osteoporosis, which is pretty catastrophic in a young person. When we talk about somebody truly needing a medical intervention, aren't we talking about a blood transfusion, an organ transplant, the removal of a malignant tumour, something genuinely, indisputably life-saving? What exactly is the notion that any young physically healthy person truly needs puberty blockers and the rest of these interventions based on? Where is the evidence for this claim? It doesn't exist. There is no justification, scientific or ethical, for prescribing them. In fact, it should be unthinkable. When it comes to gender dysphoria, there is nothing material to help diagnosis by professional clinicians and therapists. It is self-diagnosis that leads people of all ages to seek medical transition, and the gatekeepers, the professionals, are often ideologically captured or just out to make money. Okay, back to the first comment. Can't we still treat people like Jazz Jennings, who sees herself as a woman, with respect? Now, I can only guess at what the commenter means by this. I presume you mean indulge his false claim to be a woman, accept him as one, refer to him as one, and defend his right to access female spaces or occupations? No. I don't respect or disrespect Jazz Jennings beyond the basic respect for his humanity that I have for all human beings. You won't see me telling anyone to F off and die in a fire like men in this cult say to us all the time. I see Jazz Jennings primarily as a victim. He is, of course, entitled to the same basic human rights as anyone else. He shouldn't be unfairly discriminated against in employment, housing, service provision, healthcare, and by that I don't mean gender-affirming care, because that isn't healthcare as far as I'm concerned. He shouldn't be targeted with abuse and violence, of course not. But anyone who says we should go along with the lie that boys can be born in female bodies and the other way round isn't being respectful of anything except a harmful phenomenon that was born of American culture. I'm reading this book on Kindle at the moment called Crazy Like Us, The Globalization of the Western Mind by Ethan Watters, which was published in 2011. So it's not about transgenderism, doesn't mention it at all. What it does is describe how mental illnesses and ways of treating them that have become widespread in America have been disseminated around the world, that American ways of treating various psychological problems are in fact spreading them. I'll read a bit from the introduction, if I can get the right page up, my Kindle. But with the increasing speed of globalization, something has changed. The remarkable diversity once seen among different cultures' conceptions of madness is rapidly disappearing. A few mental illnesses identified and popularized in the United States, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, and anorexia among them, now appear to be spreading across cultural boundaries and around the world with the speed of contagious diseases. Indigenous forms of mental illness and healing are being bulldozed by disease categories and treatments made in the USA. There is no doubt that the Western mental health profession has had a remarkable global influence over the meaning and treatment of mental illness. mental health professionals trained in the West and in the United States in particular create the official categories of mental diseases. The American Psychiatric Association's Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, the DSM, the Bible of the profession as it is sometimes called, has become the worldwide standard. In addition, American researchers and organizations run the premier scholarly journals and host top conferences in the fields of psychology and psychiatry. Western universities train the world's most influential clinicians and academics. Western drug companies dole out the funds for research and spend billions marketing medications for mental illnesses. It makes sense, don't you think? We've seen the same thing happen with other psychological conditions. Bulimia nervosa, for example, named by a British psychiatrist called Gerald Russell, who published a paper in 1979 describing this unprecedented phenomenon in 30 patients he'd been working with. Then it appeared in the DSM, then it spread like wildfire around the world. Within a decade, millions were presenting with it. Transgenderism, I believe, is the latest in the series of conditions caused by what has been dubbed semantic contagion, but it's the most sinister and frightening form so far because of how it's been accepted and normalized. People think it's real, that people can somehow get born into the wrong sexed body, and that this is part of the natural diversity of the human species, and they see those people as marginalized even when they are privileged over others who are dismissed and discounted. Okay, that's all I'm going to say in this video. It feels a bit like I've rambled a bit, but if I can sum up the 3 points I've tried to make. First, am I opposed to medical transition in adults? Yes, I am, but I am not saying they shouldn't do it if they want to, as long as they don't use public resources or require special accommodation. 2, I think there is some evidence that undermines my commenter's claim that people claiming a transgender identity are marginalized and criminalized. I've only focused on sport in this video, but I'll look at other areas in future ones. And 3, I have shared with you an argument I find very persuasive about how the notion of gender dysphoria has become widespread. Thanks for watching. Hope to be back soon. Bye.